Thanks a lot for taking time out of your busy day to come and listen to us talk about the tips and tricks on the combine. The pictures that I'll show in here have changed a little bit. It's a different color this year, so it's all green instead of yellow. However, I have indicated within the presentation those features or subjects that pertain to both colors. While there's a lot of difference between that combine out there and the yellow one, about 75% content-wise, fundamentally they're still very much the same. So I'll talk a little bit about settings on it, those settings that are vastly different. But as far as configurations go, they're very similar. I'm also going to talk a little bit about Sieves and CMOS Auto during the presentation. So the first probably 2/3 of it, I'll go through the presentation that you have in front of you, and then the last half or last third, I'll go through some of the computer stuff, some of that really dry stuff, but probably the stuff that's most important, because that's what you have to interact with on the combine. So again, as Eric mentioned, this material, these presentations are on Altorfer's website. And it's really handy, especially when you're out in the field and you got your iPad or tablet up there with climate on it or field view, and then you can just download from there, and then you got all those presentations on your tablet or your iPhone. So that's makes it handy there. So anyway, so this presentation is similar to what we always do, but like I said, there's quite a bit of things have changed on the new ones, and just some points we want to reiterate on the yellow ones as well. So starting from the front to the back, if you have any questions at any time, please raise your hand, interrupt me. I don't mind. I learn as much from you folks as I hope you learn from what we present here. So that's how that combine came to be, is us listening to you folks. So we've made a lot of changes on that machine based upon your input. So let's go ahead and get started. Up front, one of the big changes that took place on the combine is the new belt conveyor in the Feederhouse. We still have standard the chains, so that's still a standard feature on the combine, but you do have the option of upgrading to the belts. Now, the difference between the belts and the chains, there is a little bit of a price difference, of course, but one of the reasons for the price increase is the longevity of the belts. About 2 to 2.5 times the life of chains. So they're less sensitive to foreign objects. They also have their breaking point is much higher or much greater than chains are, so they can handle a lot more stress than what chains can. So that's one of the advantages to the belts. The second is they're very quiet. When you're sitting in the cab and you have the Feederhouse on, you won't hardly be able to hear the Feederhouse running, unless you have a header on the front. Otherwise, it's going to be extremely quiet, and you'll really have to listen hard to hear the Feederhouse running. There is a little bit more maintenance initially. So at the start of harvest, I always tell everybody there's a little more maintenance to the belts. Just like any belt, you got initial stretch that takes place within the first week. But once you get by that first week, everything should be good to go, and we'll talk about that as well. Another thing that's nice about the belts is the slat sits much closer to the skin of the drum. You can see there's a gap on these. It's about 2 fingers. On this one, it's less than a finger. So that slat isn't going to bend hardly at all when it's on the belts. So there's not enough gap for it to bend. And like on the chains, if they don't have the backup rings on them, which I oftentimes promote the backup rings, putting those on so they don't bend so far back, which like there, without a backup ring, they can bend over center and then they'll really bend after that, where these will not do that. So one, the belts are going to last longer. They're going to be a lot quieter. Your slats are going to last longer on this one right here. But the trade-off for that is a little bit more maintenance in the beginning, we'll look at that here quick. So there's a side shot of those belts. For all practical purposes, just imagine each one of those belts being a very large variable speed belt. That's basically what they are, with large teeth on the back side and a spoked wheel up here on top that drives them. So the one difference you will notice for those with the new green combines, the one thing you'll notice in the cab is the speed is going to be different. Now we're using the exact same sensor in the exact same place, but the readout or display on Sieves is going to be different. And the reason why it's different is this is the back shaft speed or displayed, and we're displaying top shaft speed. So 400s, 500s, 700s have all displayed the top shaft speed. Now we're displaying the back shaft speed, which is consistent with the rest of the industry, which will make it a little bit easier to set aftermarket headers. So your MacDons, your gearing offs, your Drago heads, it'll be a little bit easier to set when you're using that. So 740 is the fastest that the Feederhouse will go. 740 on the green combines is equivalent to 430 on the yellow combines. So you just got to kind of retrain yourself. It's the same speed, just displayed differently. So that's one of the big differences, or the second difference you'll notice on the Feederhouse, especially if you've got belts on it. But everything else still applies. So how we set it still applies. Tough start off in harvest, tough green crop, usually 80 to 100% speed on the Feederhouse. I don't like to run 100% all the time. That gets a little too fast for some conditions. I'll usually start off somewhere about 80% of full speed. And then as things dry down, conditions dry down, I'll go slower. I don't like a lot of butt shelling in my header, so I'll actually get really slow with the Feederhouse. Now you can get too slow where you start pulling root balls out of the ground. You don't want to do that, so bump that speed up. If you start noticing that your corn stalks are leaning away from the combine, that's because you're running too slow on your Feederhouse and your gathering chains are running too slow, so just bump that speed up until they stay standing. And there you found the sweet spot for Feederhouse speed relative to your ground speed. So there's a picture of those backup rings right there. Now, everybody in the room is probably running with their Feederhouse drum in the up position for all crops, which is perfectly fine. I promote that often. I don't usually run, even in small grains, with it in the down position. That's probably the one crop that we do run the drum in the down position, but that was also way back when Feederhouses were this wide and headers were that wide. So today, with the big heads and the high volume of crop we're taking in, we need all that extra room or space for the crop to pass. So having the drum in the up position is probably the best thing the best setting for the Feederhouse drum. However, when the drum is in the up position, that might be a little bit challenging for trying to set or adjust your Feederhouse chains or belts, because we base that all off of when the drum is in the down position, and we measure from the third and fourth slat back. So maybe at the beginning of harvest, put the drum in the down position just so that you can get an eye on what the chain or belts look like when the third and fourth slat are just barely touching the floor. And remember that sag, so that when it is in the up position, that you get it adjusted to the same sag, if you will. We don't put a number on there anymore like we used to, because that number is variable depending upon the condition of the chain or the belts. But you just want to have a little bit of sag on the chains. Now there's a difference between the chains and the belts. So the belts I like to run a little tighter than I did the chains. So when I'm looking inside that Feederhouse, and that Feederhouse out there is up, that's a perfect height to look in there and see. The chains will have just a little bit of sag to allow them to expand upward when the crop goes under it. On the belts, I try to give it another turn, 1 or 2 turns, to get that belt just a little bit tighter. Especially in the first week of harvest, because there is going to be a little bit more stretch on those belts. So I like to get it a little tighter, snug it up so that the top shaft or the top spoke wheels don't spin out. Some of you have probably experienced that last year or the year before when if you got a new combine with the belts in the Feederhouse. Man, one of the reasons why that happened is because we no longer have the hydraulic tensioner. We have manual tensioners now. So we discontinued those hydraulic cylinders on the feeder house. So now you have to manually tension the belts or chains. And that was one of the reasons why some of these started getting out of time, is they forgot to go down there and tension their belts or chains. It is easy to get to. It's exposed, unlike what we used to use on the 500 series and early 700 series, where it was really hard to get a wrench in there and adjust the tension. Now these are on the left and right hand side, they're exposed, so they're really easy to get your 24 mil wrench in to adjust them. You'll loosen the nut on the front that locks it to the side of the machine, and then your two adjustment nuts right there, 3 and 4, are what you'll push the drum forward with. And there's a picture of that top spoke wheel right there. So it doesn't have the small teeth. We don't have the small rollers like you have on a chain, so you get the large spokes. They are rounded, so they don't bite. So there's no right angles on there for them to bite into the belt. They are rounded, so if they do get loose, there's a higher potential for that to spin out in there. So you will want to stay on top of the tension on those belts. So the first week, I would look at them. If you can look at them every day, I would do that. But every other day will be fine for the first week. After that, maybe a couple times a week, just like you do your chains. So that's about the only additional maintenance you'll have on there. So there is, like I said, there's a little bit of trade-off with using the belts, but the long-term advantages are, one, it's a much comfortable environment in the cab because it's very quiet in there. And two, they're going to last a lot longer. Belts don't break like chains do. So that'll be a big plus. So at the end of the 3rd season or so, your belts are probably still in really good shape. We've got combines out there that have been running for 4 years now with those belts in them, no problems. Everything's still good. So 4 is probably pushing the limit. So 4 to 5 years is probably about their limit on the belts. When you do need to adjust the height of the drum, it's the same on the green combine just disappeared. It's the same on the green combine as it was on the yellow combine. It's located down here on the bottom left. The easiest way to get to that, again, is to pull that faceplate all the way back to give you ample clearance down here to get your socket on those jam nuts and rotate it. Most of you will put it up and you'll just leave it in the up position. So you do want to make sure that you don't start harvesting with the faceplate in this position. That's going to create a bigger gap between the center feed auger and of the header and the feeder house drum, and you'll get some back feeding. So kind of watch that. When you try it, it's a great way to snatch the header off the trailer because it gives you more reach. But remember, you got to pull it back. It doesn't automatically go back. You got to manually put it back from the cab. You don't have to get out and do it. Now on the new combines, there is a new automatic feature for the faceplate. So I can actually set faceplate angles for different cutting heights, and it'll alternate between those automatically. You can turn that off. I think most customers run without that on. They run with it off, and they'll just manually set the pitch the way they want it. But if you want to set it automatically, you can, and it'll sit there and alternate. If you're running a Convio Flex Draper with Auto Flex, you're going to be in one position only. So it's probably, you're not going to be able to, unless you do have the other triangle set to at a different pitch. That's the only thing that'll adjust when you hit your return to cut button. But otherwise, AutoFlex, just no matter what cutting position you're at with AutoFlex, it just goes to the ground and adjusts itself, optimizes its ground pressure to maintain that lowest possible cutting position continuously. But you do have that option if you want that to adjust automatically. It's great for corn heads. I used it a lot last year, cutting a lot of down corn. That's where CMOS really came into play. I let CMOS take care of everything in the processor, in the grain tank, and I just focused my efforts on the header to keep it under all that down corn we were harvesting last fall. So I was sitting there really focused on that. Autopilot was steering me through it, but I was sitting there jockeying with the header height and header pitch, alternating between different positions so that I could pick up as much of that corn as possible. So that's a handy feature to have, that automatic pitch adjustment there. So I could raise it up, tip it forward, pitchfork that crop a little easier, lift it up, harvest it, and then have another one I could go lower on. While I'm doing all that, I don't have time to mess with the fan because you got a lot of different characteristics out there in the field when you're harvesting that much down corn. So let CMOS Automatic take care of all that in the background while you're working on the header. That works really well last fall. So any questions on the feeder house? On the new belts? I can't reiterate enough, pay attention to the tension of those belts, especially that first week. There's nothing more frustrating than trying to get those belts back into time. If they do jump out of time, there's some easy ways to get it back into time. If it does happen, I've got some instructions right here for both chains and belts. I won't go through them, but you can read those in the presentation. It's a very easy process to do when done right. And the key thing to do when trying to get any conveyor chain in a feeder house back into time is loosen the tension off the chains or belts completely. It makes it a lot easier to get it back in time, because if you're trying to do it, if you're sticking a socket in between the spokes and trying to roll that belt back, if you got full tension on there or too much tension on there, that belt's not going to want to move, and the top sprocket's going to want to spin out inside the belts. So loosen all the tension off and then roll it backwards. And on these new combines, it's very easy to rotate that chain or belt manually, just rotating that idler pulley on the left side. It's a lot easier on the green ones than it is on the yellow ones. So moving to the draper heads. I like talking about this issue because this issue, not only does this improve can improve the quality of the sample, but it can also free up horsepower and cut down on wear on the combine. So I know it's all too easy, especially on the MacDon heads, to just crank that flow control valve all the way open and just let it go. It'll feed fine. The problem with doing that, though, on any draper head is when you turn the belts wide open, you're gonna cram the left side and the right side together right in the middle, and you're gonna get a really concentrated stream focused right down the center of the combine. And that's gonna go right down the center of the APS cylinder, the threshing cylinder, and that impeller. This is actually what wears out the impeller more than anything else, more than the crop itself, is this focused stream. Because when you look at that impeller, where's it always worn at? It's always worn in the center section about that wide. Your center chevrons are rounded and worn. The blades going up to them are cupped. It's always in the middle. And why is it in the middle? Mainly because of this. The APS cylinder tries to pull as much of it apart as it can. And on an auger head, we never really had impeller wear issues on auger heads because the auger would pull that material out, would sort through that material and pull it apart and then it would feed it as wide as the feeder house. But on the drapers, you can get that concentrated stream down the middle. So my recommendation is tone that back a little bit, set your flow control valve on a MacDon about 6 to 7, and then harvest there. What that's gonna do is you're gonna have 2 swaths going into the feeder house instead of 1. So you'll have the left one and the right one. They'll kind of come together in a V pattern. You'll have the left one and the right one next to each other. They'll be shorter and wider, and that'll make the combine a lot more efficient during the threshing process. It'll also allow that impeller to divide that crop into the rotors a lot easier too. And your grain quality will be up. We've actually walked behind combines in the past, especially those with a lot of wear on the impeller, and slowed down the flow control valve, and the operator said the percent engine load dropped because we did that. So when you're trying to put 40 foot into a swath that wide, that's probably about that tall, there's a lot of compression that has to take place. So spread it out. On the Convio, our new Convio flex drapers, you can adjust the side belts and the center belt speed independently. I usually set the center belt a little bit faster than the side belts. So as soon as the crop exits the side belts, that center belt pushes it, takes it right into the feeder house real quickly, and it really forms that V pattern a lot better. And once I get that dialed in on the Convio, then I'll usually go into Sieves and I'll turn on auto belt speed, so that when I speed up the combine, or cruise pilot speeds it up, the belt speed speeds up. If I slow down, it slows down as well. So it's all on automatic, just like your auto reel speed does. Runs at a ratio of ground speed. And if you get too slow, well, you'll just get some back feeding. So if it's too slow, then speed those belts up a little more so you get them beyond the sides of the opening and back into the center. But we don't want this up here, especially you seed growers, seed bean growers. Edible bean folks have been running their Draperhead speeds like this for a long time, because in edible beans and peas, they have zero tolerance for damage. Those are the guys that oftentimes just take the door off the returns elevator and just let all their tailings run on the ground, because they know it's going to get damaged and they're going to get docked for it. So they've been doing this for a long time. So they've, where quality is of the essence, the Draperhead has a lot to do with that. So making sure we got the right belt speed. Moving into the threshing area of the combine. So everybody is familiar with the disawning plates. They remain, this area right here remains unchanged on the new combines. In fact, the grates that you used in your 400 or 500 or 700 will fit in the pre-concave of the new combines. It's the same size grates. The disawning plates are the same. We still have the lever on the right side of the feeder house. We did add an additional cover plate to the concave, I'll show you here in a second, that will help out in soybeans and wheat for those that are doing it. But back to the disawning plates. This is a really handy tool on the combine. This grate right here is key to the productivity of a Lexion. Because what happens in this area right here, we call pre-separation. So that's the concave right here. And that can separate up to 30% of the crop prior to threshing. And when we're talking about quality, the quality is best attained by getting as much down through the grates as fast as possible, so as early as possible. So that's why we have this up here, because there's a lot of crop that gets separated by the header, by the feeder house, and by the action of this cylinder. So why not drop it down to the cleaning system and let the threshing cylinder work on the tougher, more resilient crop? Quality goes up that way. Capacity also goes up when you use this. So I use these sparingly. I know it's real easy to keep the round bar grates in there. That is the go-to grate anymore for all combines, is the round bar, especially the pre-concave grates, and just close the disawning plates up. But if you're in seed beans, I would recommend using a set of wire or the press plate with key stop grates, the 12 mil grates. I would use those up here so that I can maintain my 30% pre-separation so that you can get all your quality. So, or you can do a better job on the quality side. While round bar will work, especially as the beans get drier, you're going to get pods that will escape between the round bars, and then you'll have to run your bottom sieve tighter to clean that up. And then you're going to be recirculating crop back around the combine, and that's a little bit more stress on it. So although we don't really rethresh anything, we carry everything back to the APS cylinder, so your returns drops onto here, not on top of the threshing cylinder. So it gets blended with the incoming crop, and that's usually where it gets reprocessed right there. That's usually enough action to get the crop reprocessed a second time, and then it just falls through the pre-concave. So that's why we don't have the hot spot on the center of the threshing cylinder, is we don't drop, like some rotary combines do, we don't drop the returns onto the threshing segment of the combine. So these grates right here, those are the 10 millimeter grates, the 10 millimeter wire. Those are perfectly fine for soybeans, green stem beans especially. As conditions dry down and you go into corn, you got the round bars in there and you're going back and forth, round bars will be fine. They do a great job. Just keep in mind that occasionally If you harvest some really tough crop, maybe you have to change those. We didn't change the way we change them. It's still the same easy procedure that we've always had to change them. Actually, we did make it a little easier. I'll show you a picture of that in a minute. So there's the front grates, same grates we've always had. We did add another grate because the threshing cylinder on the new combines went from 24 inches to 30 inches in diameter. So the threshing cylinder is the same diameter as everybody else's single rotor. And then our rear impeller now is 24 inches. So it's the same diameter as a yellow threshing cylinder. That's going to give you a lot more inertia to power through those tough conditions. Because we went larger in diameter with the cylinder, we had to go longer with the concave. So we actually made an interchangeable front segment. Now, most of you folks in this area, in this region, are probably not going to change this out. But if you do want to, if you do a specialty crop, say field peas or something that's very delicate, and you want to change that, you can, especially on a track machine. You just pull it out over the left track and then slide another one inside. So the wheeled machines, it's a little more difficult, but the track machines, it's very easy. Again, the odds of you doing that are very slim. Most everybody will just have full round bar and won't change it. But if you do want it, you do have that flexibility to change that grate right there if you want to. And there's the different grates. Here's that 10 millimeter wire right here. And then this is the 12 millimeter right here, 12 by 40. That's kind of the press plate concave with key stock on it. This is the one that we used to have in the 400 and 500 series. And this is the one that came out later that was standard with combines when they got ordered with a small grain conversion kit. Both of them work equally as well. This one might be a little more aggressive. So if you do have small grains like wheat, this one would probably work better than this one. But for soybeans, that one's perfectly fine if you've got that. On the round bar, again, like I said, that's the go-to grate. Now, this is the smooth slotted grate for corn that we used to have standard in corn combines. I still use that every now and then. Occasionally, I'll hear either salesmen or customers complaining about late season corn harvest where they're getting those sticks in the grain tank. That's usually the tops have broke out, the small diameter tops of the stalk have broke out and are going through the combine. They're about that size or half that size, and they conform pretty easily to that gap right there. So one way to get rid of those, especially late in the season, if you've got these, those sticks aren't going to pass through this. So most of them come through here. They don't get ground up by the threshing cylinder or broke up into smaller pieces by the threshing cylinder. So that's why I'd put these in here. Since it's late in the season, you can still use these because the corn's dried down. It's not that tough to thresh. You can put these back in there and use those. This one right here, that's usually where those come from. So as good as the round bar is, it does have a little bit of trade-off. You got large slots in there, and the APS cylinder does a great job of reorganizing all the ears. So we don't have, most of the ears that go in the combine don't go in like this. The spiral aligned paddles on that APS cylinder actually will turn those ears parallel to the cylinder and roll it through the concaves. So that's where you get the stock pieces in. So they'll sometimes fall that way. You'll get a few of them that go in like that, but those will usually get busted up by the cylinder as they do that. But if you're getting those big pieces like that, one, open the concave up a little more so that you're not breaking the tips, but that's really hard, especially late season when those tops are breaking out. Just try to put these back in there. And they go in the exact same way they've always gone. And you have a new rock trap now with an ejector bar that makes that easier. So when I pull this lever down, it pushes that ejector, opens the door, and then pushes the ejector rod out to push all the debris out of the rock trap. So I'll sit there and work that 3 or 4 times on the side of the combine to clean that rock trap out, so I'm not sitting under the rock trap having all that junk land in my lap while I'm digging it out with a pry bar. So here is that new cover plate on the combines. It's under the front section of the main concave. So for those in here that have done wheat in the past, that put that bolt-in section in underneath the concave, that's what this is. So I got a rotary handle back here on the left side above the back wheel of the track that I can open and close that. If you have auto threshing, if you got CMOS auto on your combine with auto threshing, it'll be hydraulic. There's a hydraulic cylinder right there. And it'll open and close that door in soybeans and wheat only as needed, not corn. We don't want to close that down in corn. We need all the capacity we can get. But it will open and close it in soybeans as needed. That's kind of a handy tool. It's like a disawning plate for the main concave. You'll also get what's called intensive threshing segments. So those that can remember back to the 400 days, maybe some of them used them. There were those bolt-in that angle iron that went on between the pre-concave and the main concave. Instead of bolting that in, now it's hydraulic. We just roll it in place. That only engages in small grains if you have auto threshing. You can manually engage it if you want, but that's probably a little too aggressive for soybeans. So those getting auto thresh on their combines, you will have this as an option in Sieves, and with auto thresh, that cover plate also is an option within Sieves with a hydraulic cylinder on it. But you won't use that in corn or soybeans. That becomes a shear bar right there, and that's the last thing you want in corn and soybeans is a shear bar. But in small grains, with round bar especially, it works fine. For the 700 series, we still have the reduction bolts. So if you're running a 700 series and we start to run slower and slower on the high side in soybeans to protect the quality of that bean, you will get to a speed range where, say you get down around 500, once I hit about 500 and I need to go slower, I'll switch to low range, because low range is a lot more powerful, has a lot more torque behind it than high range does. You're running at the bottom of the pulley, bottom of the variator. So flip it over down here, you get a lot more power. If it's a new 700 or 7,000 or 8,000 series, you do it all from the cab, and that's standard. Most everybody, I don't know of anybody the last 2 harvest seasons that harvested soybeans in high range. There's no need to harvest soybeans in high range anymore, only wheat, small grains. Because of that larger diameter, threshing cylinder and impeller, I can do at 280 to 300 what I used to have to do at 500 to 600 on the yellow combines. So you can run much slower, use a much lower tip speed, do the same threshing without having all that harsh, rubbing action on the beans. So you'll get a higher sample. When we did our soybean comparison back in benchmarking against the competition back in 19, those were the settings we used. We were running right around 300, 280 to 330 was our range that we ran in. So literally, you can use corn settings in soybeans. Those are the same settings I use on the green combines in corn. I'll start out about 300 to 350 in corn. So there's a lot of similarities there. So now on the new ones, like I said, low range for corn and beans. It used to be soybeans was up here on high range on the yellow combine, starting around 550 to 600. Today we can start right around 300 to 350 if we want, and do a much better job. Get the same, if not more, productivity without the harsh treatment or harsh environment on the beans. The only thing you'll notice if you're standing out on the side of the combine when somebody shifts from high to low is you might hear a thump. And that's the shifting rail moving in the top of that gearbox from high to low. That's the only thing you'll notice. And that shifting rail is right up here about the 12 o'clock position. That's also the shifting rail that you'll use if you want to put it in neutral. You can put a bolt in there, it's threaded. You can put a bolt in there and just pull it out into neutral. So neutral is a manual. You can't do neutral in the cab. We still offer The V plates for the 700 series, I know a lot of folks are running them very successfully. The V plates help that 700 series threshing cylinders begin to part that crop so that the rear impeller's job is a lot more efficient. This is what the new impeller looks like, and these are to scale. So that's the 18-inch impeller of the 700 series. That's the new 24-inch diameter impeller in the green combines. So a lot larger in diameter, a lot heavier, a lot more inertia to power through those tough conditions, especially when we're running in low range. So that's what helps us feed that crop very efficiently and smoothly in low range. Now this picture right here is from a 570, so a 500 series pre-wear strip. So we didn't put the wear strips on in the factory back in the 500 days. It's got the holes on it to bolt them on, but we didn't install them back in the 500 days. So the reason I show you this is to show you what a worn out impeller looks like. So you can see how cupped that is right there, the divot right there, and it's on both sides, and how rounded the edges are. That impeller is worn out. The problem this guy was having is he kept back feeding, pushing straw out of the feeder house, coming back over the top. They changed the chain. They put new APS caps on the APS cylinder. None of that fixed it. They just kept spending money after money after money. And I kept telling them it's not that, it's the impeller. They finally put wear strips on here and it solved the problem. So this is what a worn out impeller looks like. So that little bit of cupped area right there and that rounded edge, and that's mainly on the center, that's a worn out impeller. Your impeller should look like that. So you can see when you get the wear strips on it, it makes the blades taller, more aggressive to grab more. It also adds more weight to that impeller. And that's what the impellers came out of the factory on the 700 series. They had the wear strips on them. So inspect your rear impellers before harvest. Just like chopper blades, worn chopper blades will make your percent engine load go up faster. Slow harvest. So will the rear impeller if it's not in good condition. So check this. If you got 3 or 4 seasons in your combine, go up in the grain tank, pop the back door off the grain tank floor, and check out your rear impeller and make sure the center, about the center 8 or 9 inches here, and all the chevrons in the middle, make sure they're in good shape. If they're not, get new wear strips and put on there. Take your reduction bolts out, and you can just sit on the floor and rotate manually by hand the impeller, and bolt on the new blades. That'll give it a lot more weight. You'll definitely notice a difference when you do that. If it's in the middle of season and you notice that you're wearing, that things seem to be labored, late, say midway through soybean season, you can actually take these right here and put them in the middle. Those and put them there. Take these blades, put them over here, and these over here. That way you're getting the fresh edges in the middle and putting the worn ones on the outside. You can do that in mid-season. I recommend, though, if you're doing that, you really need to replace all the blades anyway. And the ones that I recommend are getting these. So if you want to get nearly the same performance out of that impeller as a Sunnybrook, I don't have any problems with using a Sunnybrook in a 500 or 700 series. That really improves the efficiency of the combine. But if you can't get a Sunnybrook, or you don't want to spend the money on a Sunnybrook, get these rice wear strips, these heavy-duty rice wear strips. They're going to last longer. They're nearly double the thickness. They're going to add a lot more weight to that impeller to power through those tough conditions. That's what comes from the factory, and that's the optional ones through parts. And those are the ones I recommend putting on after when it comes time to reflighting that impeller. But reflighting the impeller by itself will make a huge difference. Even if you don't put these on, reflight the rear impeller. And then you can add those later. You'll notice an improvement by putting these in there. And then we've also got, if things get really tough, you can put the sunflower kit, which basically turns the center of the impeller into a saw blade. So it saws through those tough stems so they can part and go into the right rotors so they don't hang up here in the middle. But on the new impeller, we don't have to worry about that. You already got the bolt-on sprocket teeth here in the middle that acts as a saw blade to saw through those stems. So it's going to run really smooth at tough 40 foot of tough green stem beans at 300 RPM. You wouldn't do that on a 500 or 700, but you can do it with this one. And it's really smooth, even at 4.5, 5 miles an hour. So, any questions on the threshing? Huh? You got 2 new ones coming, don't you, this year? You have to try it. So, and you got standard, that new auto crop flow too. Do not turn that off. The only combines I've seen plugged are the ones that people that turn that off for some reason. So we'll cover that in the Sieves section. I gotta point that out. I see occasionally too many people shut their auto crop flow off thinking it's part of CMOS Auto, and it's not. On the rotors, so most everybody here has 2 rotor cover plates in the fronts of your rotors. Some of you might have opted up for the 4D cleaning system. That's going to give you up to 4 rotor cover plates that will counter the side roll of the combine. So if the combine leans to the left, the rotor cover plates will angle to the right to keep everything evenly distributed on the rotary turn span so that it doesn't overburden the pre-cleaner or the upper sieve as it flows down. But if you don't have those, everybody has at least 2. And 2 are the most that I ever use in soybeans. I don't use them in corn. We want all that open area in corn. But in soybeans and wheat, I'll close those down. 1, if you notice everything looks good in the sample, which tells me the cylinder speed and the concave are set right, no cracks or splits or unthreshed pods or heads, but I might be getting a little carryover out the back because I'm in some higher moisture stems. One of 2 things you can do. 1, you can speed the rotors up and get more separation force, or start closing down your rotor cover plates. Hold the crop in the cage a little longer, allow it to optimize its separation, and as you do that, you might notice that, hey, my returns went down. And why the returns went down is because when we start closing the rotor cage off in chaff heavy crop, we put more of a spin on it and push it to the end of the rotors. Or we drop it out further back so it has time to spread out more evenly before it goes down, so we don't have a localized concentration of chaff on the cleaning shoe. So in soybeans, I would definitely start, if they're manually controlled, I would definitely close the first ones down, then close the second ones down and see how well those work. And I oftentimes run with both of them closed in soybeans. If you have CMOS auto separation, we'll open them and close them as needed as you travel through the field. You'll watch that on the display. You'll see sometimes one will be shut, the second will be open, they'll both be closed, or they'll both open up. And it'll determine when it needs to do that based upon what it's seeing coming out of the back of the combine, either rotor loss or on the cleaning shoe. So it has the ability to sense that. That's part of the CMOS Auto. It's a self-learning system. That's what differs. That's how CMOS differs from other automation system, other combine automation systems, is it's a self-learning system. So another thing too, I notice every year, and I just had a call on this Monday. A lot of times we like to use a lot of rotor speed because we still think that sometimes these rotors are threshing. These rotors aren't threshing. These rotors are only separating. So run them as slow as you can get them to start in corn. Beans, no, you want those to be at a minimum of 100 RPM over. Now don't think that 100 RPM over means that that's where they have to be. You can go faster than that. Raise them up, that's the minimum, just to keep everything metered through the combine. But in corn, I can actually run the rotors slower than the cylinder. And that's usually where I start out. I'll start out at 370 to 400 on my rotors. The call that I got from one of our folks, one of our reps down in Texas, was customers cutting 13% moisture 125 bushel corn, he's getting rotor loss. Well, the first thing I asked is, what's rotor speed? He said 600. Well, 600 is way too fast for corn. Now, there is a couple conditions that I will go up there, and I'll talk about that here in a minute, but that's way too fast, especially for dry corn, because the kernel weight is a lot lighter in dry corn than it is in wet corn. Wet corn, your kernel weight's going to be really high, and high moisture corn can handle higher rotor RPMs. But you get in really dry corn, 15, 16 or lower, and you get your rotors running too fast, say 600 RPM, and they can turn into an auger. Any rotor does that, whether it be a 30-inch diameter axial rotor or twin rotors, they'll turn into an auger. So you don't want that to happen. So keep those rotors a little slower. Watch your loss sensors. I set most of my loss sensors, I start with them about 70. I bump them up a little bit from where the factory settings are. I put them up to about 70. At the Farm Progress Show, I'll probably put them up to 90. So I know exactly where loss is coming from very quickly. That's just a habit I do at those, but normally in a demo or normal operations, I put them about 70 or 75, and that's where I run them. So watch your loss sensors, and if you start seeing them go up, try slowing that rotor down in corn, and you'll see how your loss will start to go down. So there's the bottom side of the rotors with the rotor cover plates. So this is what one would look like with 4D cleaning. If you don't have 4D cleaning, you'll just have the rotor cover plates down here on the front two grates. And there are two parts to it. There's a left side or a right side and a left side if you're looking at it from the front. So they do close, they have different controllers. That way when they do use the 4D, that they can angle the material to the high side better. And it is all controlled from the cab. And like I said, if you've got 4D cleaning, it'll be automatic. If you have CMOS automatic, they'll be automatic also. Any questions on the rotors? Just keep in mind in corn, now beans we don't really have a problem in, but corn, sometimes we run too fast in corn. And I'll show you here in a minute when I do run fast in corn. So let's move on to the cleaning system. The prep pans have changed just a little bit. They got 6 inches longer because the threshing house in the combine went longer because the larger diameter and the longer concave. We had to go 6 inches longer here to keep the prep pans underneath the APS system. But otherwise, everything's still the same. They still pull out the same. If you haven't pulled them out before, I would pull them out just to make sure you can pull them out. Make sure they stay clean. In the past, I've always said put grease, spray some grease on the sides so that makes them move in and out a little easier. It also prevents that dust and starchy residue from setting up when humidity hits it. Another thing I did last year, I think I heard it from someone in one of the clinics, so I tried it. I took my little cordless die grinder and just buzzed the burrs off the side. And that actually helped. That made the tolerances a little bit larger so I could slide it in easier without hanging up. So you could try that, take a right angle grinder or a little die grinder and just buzz the sides of them just to clean the sides off, and they'll slide in and out of there a little easier. But I'd still put the grease in there just to keep it from setting up. If you haven't pulled them out of there before, you can probably ask somebody else in the room what it's like to pull them out if they've never done that for a season or two, because they can get stuck in there. Just don't break them. They will break in two. But one other thing too is you want to keep them clean. This is a great tool for you seed bean producers because it really speeds up the clean out process. Now they're made out of UHMW, which has a lubricating property to it, to the surface, so there's not a lot of material that likes to stick to the surface of this unless you're harvesting in mud, and that will stick to it. But on the new combines, the concave door on the left side is much larger. So I can pop that hatch off and I can look right down onto the top of the prep pans and see if the front section has any buildup of material. Now, if you do have a little bit of buildup, you want to get that off because material or debris attracts debris. So if you got a little bit in the front, you're probably going to get a lot more. You can also reach in over, when your rock trap's open, you can reach in over the door and you can feel in there that way too. Moving back to the chaffer, so there's the back end of your prep pans. This is a 74 or 7500 combine right here. So it is the standard chassis. It's 11 inches narrower than the 8000 series. But that's your upper sieve or chaffer right there. And this is your pre-cleaner. So we don't have a physical pre-cleaner. Our pre-cleaner is an effect. We use low volume, high pressure air right here that blasts the majority of the chaff to the chaff spreaders. Now the one thing that I've noticed every year is we like to use a lot of fan speed. I spend more time between 980 and 1050 than I do 1100 and up. And the reason why I do that is because of the design of the fan. The turbine fans generate a lot more pressure per RPM than a scroll type fan used by our nearest competitors. So we get a lot more benefit each RPM, a lot more pressure per RPM than those do. And the reason we use a turbine fan is to get a very consistent flow of air. We want to have a static line right here. We don't want more pressure here or here and less in the middle. That's what those scroll fans do. So when the air goes on a scroll fan, when the air enters here on the side, it shoots right out on the side of the cleaning shoe. So you get higher pressure here. That's why when I do grain loss checks, I don't just check in the middle of the combine. I want to check on the sides, not just because the rotors have a tendency to throw to one side or the other. It's because the cleaning fan will also blow more crop out the sides. So that's one of the reasons why we use the turbine fan. One, to give you more adjustment, more benefit from the fan, plus to have this static line right here so all of our pressure is equal the full width of the cleaning shoe. So by doing that, by staying in say 980 to 1050, I use more of my upper sieve. Instead of opening the sieves up and dumping everything through up here and then putting more to the bottom sieve and then having more returns and then getting more clean out in the grain tank, I close these tighter, slow the fan down, and shift a lot of the material that's falling through here back farther and use the full area of that upper sieve. That's how I can always tell what kind of combine you used to have based on how you have your cleaning system set. When these are wide open or nearly wide open and the fan speed's way up and the bottom siev's real tight, I know you used to have a green combine. That's usually the way those things were set. So the bottom sieve is only designed to handle about 40% of the crop. It's not designed to handle a large volume of crop. That's just for fine tuning your grain sample. So use more of this area, slow the fan down a little bit, watch your loss sensors, and when you see a lot of loss coming up on your cleaning shoe, slow your fan down and bring it back into check. You'll notice that, and you'll still do a good job. But close this down, start using a little more of your sieve. When you watch CMOS Auto, how many have CMOS Auto in here and actually watch it on the screen? Hell, you'll be driving through the field doing corn. You'll be doing 4,500 bushel hour of corn, and it'll have your top sieve at 9 and your fan at like 980 or 1,000. And then all of a sudden it'll hit a spike and it'll open up to 14 or 15 and the fan speed will go up. But it's always changing in there, and you'll be surprised that you might be harvesting along in 230 bushel corn, the top sieve will be at 10, the bottom might be at 5. So it's constantly adjusting itself. So in that condition, at that point in time, when you looked on there, it was tight. The cleaning shoe can handle that. When you look at your fan, if your top sieve is really tight, your fan will be slow. If your bottom sieve is really tight, now your fan will still be up a little higher to compensate for that. But it's always interesting to watch CMOS Auto work in the combine. It's kind of humbling when you pride yourself in being able to set a combine really well, and then the computer comes along and does just as good, if not better. And that's its goal. So whenever a customer gets CMOS Auto and they're questioning whether or not it really works, the one thing I'll do is let's run for an hour or an hour and a half with your settings, and we'll just watch it on the yield monitor. And then after that time, let's change loads, start a new load, and let's switch on CMOS Automatic, starting with your settings, or mess them all up and see how quickly it reacquires the settings. And see how close they are. If they're the same, then CMOS Auto is doing exactly what it's supposed to do. It's doing everything you're doing without you having to interact with the combine. But most of the time it's doing about 5 to 10% more than what you're doing, because it's just thinking and making adjustments a whole lot faster than what we can do. And the cleaning system is one of those areas where it really focuses on. So the deep tooth sieves are still standard on top. Up until what, 18 or 17, they were standard on the bottom. And then we went to the new CB22 because of CMOS Auto. These have a lot of capacity in the bottom, especially for high moisture corn or any corn crop, but we needed a little bit more cleaning ability. A lot of folks would, in beans and wheat, we'd have to run those all the way shut at 0. CMOS won't run at 0. No matter how often I put it at 0, it'll open it back to 2 or 3. It does not like 0. It's been programmed not to like 0. So that's why we went to this style of sieve. So this sieve is basically this one, and we raised the webbing up between the fingers. So it still has the same capacity from pivot to pivot as the deep tooth, but with the cleaning performance of a frogmouth sieve. So that gives you a lot more cleaning performance. That's what they look like. These were two C6 760s, so these are like 14 or 15 model 760s on the same farm. One had deep tooth lower, and that's what the deep tooth lower looks like when it's on 0. And that's where he was set for soybeans. Then we put the CB22s in the other one. These were at 5. So this one is at 5. You can't hardly see the clean out in there. There's a few little pod pieces in there, but you had a lot more in here. So if you don't have these in the bottom, they'll fit any combine that's got jet stream cleaning, from 500, 700 series combines. The later model 700 series, the last 3 years or so, had these in the bottom. If not, you had these, which does a great job. To get that out of there, you're going to have to use a lot more fan speed. But in corn, they're great, but sometimes we get a little bit more clean out in the grain in the bin than we like. If you have CMOS Auto and it doesn't seem to be cleaning quite right on a 700 series, it's probably because those are in the bottom. I would opt up to these right here, get a much better sample. Easier to set the cleaning system. One of the presentations that's available on the website is settings guides for both 700 series and the new 7,000 and 8,000 series combines. And in the back of them, I've got these tips for harvesting different crops: corn, soybeans, and small grains. So one of the first things that I do when I start shelling corn, and I'm always going from, well, you guys are going from field to field, but I'm usually going from farm to farm when I do demos. I want to know what those ears are like before I start harvesting. So I will always walk into every field before I start harvesting, 30 yards or so, grab 3 or 4 ears and hand shell them. And the reason I hand shell them is to find out how easy or hard the kernels come off the cob. If they come off the cob really easy, well, it's going to be easy to set that combine. That's going to be it's easy to thresh. If they're really tough to get off the cob, well, you're going to have to set the combine more aggressively to get those kernels off the cob. If it's hard in your hand, it's going to be hard in the combine also. So after I've hand shelled it to find out how easy or hard it is to thresh, then I measure the cob. That's where I start my concave settings. Now, not everybody carries a little caliper around with them. Use your combine wrench. It's 13 millimeter. Just gap it. Usually it'll go two wrench gaps. So that's 26 or 27 millimeter. Most corn cobs are about 26 to 28. Some go up to 30. Most of them around that 26 to 28 millimeter. So that's where I'm going to set my round bar concave, is about right at cob diameter, maybe a little bit over if it's really dry. If you're, and that's also going to help when you run into conditions like this. It's a whole lot easier to get the kernels off the cob here when you run a little wider concave than it is to smash them down and just grind them all off. What happens when you get into these really soft, spongy cobs is the cobs like to fall apart. And then when I'm looking in the back of the combine, I'll look on the sieve and you might see chunks of cob with kernels still on them. Well, if you see them on the sieve, just imagine how many of those are going into the chopper and being flung out behind the combine. So let's start to clean that up once we see that. And that's why a lot of times I'll drop the chopper as I enter in the field. I'll windrow maybe 30 yards and then radio back to the auger cart driver or get out and say, hey, do you see any kernels left on the cob? If they don't see any, I'll put the chopper back up and take off. So I want to make sure I get all these kernels off. If it's really soft and spongy and you try to take the easy way out and run a tighter concave, you're going to blow the sides out of those cobs, and you're going to thresh quarter pieces a cob instead of round pieces. And that's going to result in more kernels going in riding out on the cob pieces into the chopper, more grain loss. So that's where I'll set a little wider concave. The round bar concaves really work well in that. Sometimes I'll close the disawning plates down in those conditions. Now, closing the disawning plates down, I lose my 30% pre-separation, but I get more crop-on-crop action. So that's one exception to the disawning plates. When I'm in corn, I'll get more rubbing action that way. And as soon as I get out of those conditions, then I'll open it back up to get my pre-separation back. Another thing that you can do that's very easy, you can do right from the cab, and it's one of the benefits of Lexion, is you can adjust your separation speed separately from your threshing. So if I do see this, or I've got an ear or ears that the kernels just don't want to come off, it's tough to hand shell, then you will get to a point on your rotor speed where you'll generate enough separation force or centrifugal force, you'll blow those kernels, they'll come right off that cob. And that's usually when you're pushing that 600, 650 RPM. Now you can do that in corn, just watch out, especially in really good yielding corn, you might have to pull back on the stick, keep the combine under it, under your loss, because you are creating a little bit of an auger effect. But those two rotors that are 14 foot long each, just for separation, are generating enough separation force to blow that off. You can't do that with other combines. When you try to do that with a red or green combine, you just start over threshing the heck out of the crop up front. Then you open your concave up to compensate, and then you're resetting the combine. So that's one of the advantages that Lexions have over the competition, is I can adjust my rotor speed to compensate for these tough conditions like this. So keep that in mind. You can move that rotor speed up 550, 600, 650 if you have to. Just remember, you might have to slow down a little bit, but you're keeping all that crop in the combine. You're getting it all off the cob and keeping it in the combine. Soybeans, got a lot of tips here for soybeans, small grains, for those that do wheat. So getting back to the chopper, the standard chopper that we've got, basic residue management system, this has no power spreaders whatsoever. It's all manually adjusted. The one thing I'll point out is it's 35 foot only. The old MAV chopper that we used to have, I could tweak that out to 38 or 40 foot. I can't do that to this one. So those that have these, you're limited to 35 foot spread because everything's going through just the vanes on the back. If you want to go over 35, then we got a couple other options there for you, the advanced and premium choppers. But this one has levers on top of the tailboard that allow you to adjust the angle of the vanes. It has a lever operated or a pin operated push-pull clutch on the left side to change your speed range. So we don't have to detension a belt and move it from one pulley set to the other. It's done right here on the hub of the rotor. And then it's got lever operated stationary knives. Here is the premium or the advanced chopper. We used to call it the turbo chop. A lot of you folks have this one already. The difference between this one and the yellow ones is it has hydraulic cylinders up here instead of the electric motors. So the center deflectors won't stall when they get into tough conditions or they get in a bind. So they'll constantly move. They also move very quickly, which allows us to have the side wind compensators or side slope compensators installed on the chopper as well. Now, one thing I'll mention about this chopper or the premium chopper is the stationary knives. We use basically double the stationary knives everybody else does. So we don't have to use so many of our knives. We don't have to put them in 100%. I recommend putting them in only 50%. If you want to turn everything to dust, put them in all the way. It'll pulverize everything. But remember, larger particles spread or go farther than fine ones. you can throw rocks farther than you can throw feathers. So putting in more stationary knives creates smaller particles, and you may be challenged to get it out to 40 foot or 45 foot when you got the stationary knives all the way in. So pull them out halfway. I've even got folks that don't even run stationary knives. Their particle size is still like that because our choppers are pretty aggressive. They'll also use the friction plate and create that speed bump in there that forces material higher into the knife, get that tumble action, forces it higher into the blade and get more action that way, and then you really don't need to use those. So in soybeans, I'd start with these in only halfway. You can either adjust it from the cab or do it with the lever on the outside, and then engage this also, which is also adjusted from the cab or outside. Now the difference between this chopper and this one is the radial arms that are on the outside. This chopper, how I determine the width of my spread pattern is I adjust the angle of the tailboard. When it's up like this, when it's perpendicular to the ground, just imagine that being 30 foot. Next one down is 35, 40, 45 foot. And then use these in here to nudge it out away from the standing crop or closer to the standing crop to get to that header width. That's what those are for, to fine tune it. So this is your header width, so 30, 35, or 30 and under, 35, 40, 45 roughly. I mean, there might be some depends on the consistency of the crop, but in general 30, 35, 40, and 45 and larger, and then use these to fine tune it. So the lower this tailboard goes, the wider it spreads. It's like putting your thumb on a garden hose. The more you press it towards the water stream, the more pressure you generate. The similar is true here, except we don't lower the tailboard. We adjust the timing on those radial arms, and they do the same thing. They pulse the crop. So this chopper and this one, when they spread, you'll see that fans the material out behind it. What this one does is it pulses the crop and slings it side to side behind the combine. That eliminates those streaks. The only thing you're going to notice is on the edge of the standing crop, it's going to have a little bit of a zigzag pattern, look like fishbacks because the arms are doing this. But you're not going to have any of those streaks behind the chopper when you use these. And for those on this one, occasionally if you notice a streak in the middle that doesn't have any residue, I usually cut the right angle. So I measure in on the bottom of the paddle, I'll measure in 4 inches and up 4 inches and cut that right angle out. You can buy them that way already cut. And put those on there, and that fans more material out as well. Or you can install these cast fingers from the premium. You can put those, because the spinners are the same. These spinners and these are the same, it's just the fingers that are different. You can put those cast fingers on there, and those will do similar. They'll fan the material out better. So, and one last thing on the chopper. I know a lot of you probably have chopper knives that look like this. I wouldn't start harvest with that, especially if I'm going into soybeans. That's like a butter knife. That's going to cause your percent engine load to go up faster and maybe slow your harvest down. So all choppers, whether it be a chopping corn head, a chopper on the back of the combine, your bush hog or lawnmower, they only cut with that outer end of the blade. So a chopper knife on a combine only cuts with this area here. They don't cut up here. If they're cutting up here, you've lost a lot of mass on that chopper and it's not going to sling anything. So we want to make sure that we get these turned around so you get your right angle, your sharp edge on the front. I can probably start off in corn this way, but before I switch to beans, I'm going to want my knives to look like this. And on the backs of your choppers, you can get to them easier if you take the back door off. Just unbolt it from the pivot bar and take it out of there. It's a lot easier to stand on a ladder and work down on your chopper drum than it is to sit underneath it with your arms up. After about 1 or 2 knives, your arms are about ready to give out on you. So that's one of the easier ways to do that. Just take your back door off and work from the top down on top of your drum rather than reaching up underneath. So, and if you break one, these new combines have a little storage compartment, a little part storage compartment on them where you can store up to 8 knives, actually. So if you break one, You got to change 8. I know that sounds like a lot. Why do I have to change 8 if I break 1? What am I trying to maintain on that drum? Balance. So this is the fastest thing on the combine next to the engine. It's actually running faster than the engine by about a few hundred RPM. So if I break 1, say if I break number 9, I'll change 9, 10, 11, and 12, and then 13, 14, 15, and 16. If I don't have enough knives to do that, I'll take all of those 8 out to keep everything in balance. You can also rob these out here on the ends and put in the middle. Put those in the middle because the deflectors off the end of the rotors kind of deflect the material more towards the center than to the outside of the drum. So that'll help out. But in the toolbox on the combine, you pull the tailgate down. There's a storage box on these new ones. You lift it up and it's got slots in there for chopper knives. It's also got the indentation for your knife guards and sickle sections and hardware to put in there also for all your wearables out in the field. And you'll notice on the new green combines, the power spreader drive system on the left side has a 2-rib belt now instead of a single rib. So you won't have to, that belt's not going to be overloaded like sometimes in the past when running big heads were. So one other thing too, the tensioner on the elevator is no longer hydraulic. So we went to a manual tensioner just like Ag Leader uses, and John Deere uses the same thing because they use an Ag Leader yield monitor. We pull down instead of push up. And the reason why we do that is our yield sensor now is a mass flow instead of the volumetric sensor. And most of those I've noticed over the last couple years running it are coming out of the factory. They're usually within 2 to 3% from the factory, which is really good. That's what a lot of folks, their goal is to get within 3% or under on their yield monitors. We're coming out of the factory about that. So it's a very accurate system, uses the exact same calibration method without having to do the test weight. Don't do the test weight. You don't have to do that anymore.